All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Andrea Drews. I'm a professor at Rider University, which is in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, kind of central part of the state. I'm so happy to be part of the team to develop and share the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge with all of you. I've had the opportunity to work really closely with Sustainable Jersey for this project. Sustainable Jersey and the Sustainability Institute at the College of New Jersey is a nonprofit organization focused on supporting local actions on addressing today's environmental, economic, and social challenges. I also really want to thank our program partners for this project, Atlantic City Electric, Exelon Foundation, and the Drumthwacket Foundation for sponsoring the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge, both these great educational sessions to start off, but also the challenge itself and those great prizes that you can win money for your school to continue wonderful climate action projects. To get to know everyone, where we're coming from, I'd love if you could type the name of your school and where you're located into the chat. When you're using the chat, make sure to click on so that it says panelists and attendees, or for some of you, it might say everyone. So make sure to click that option when you are using the chat box to make sure that we're sending it to all of our listeners out there. And if you're watching this from if you're watching this again as a recording, hello from February 2nd, and we're so happy that you're able to join us, and we hope that you're finding this information useful. Put in the Highlands, great. Give folks another minute. Monroe Township, okay. Awesome. Well, great to meet you all. I'd like to thank you for joining us as we dive into truly one of the biggest problems facing all of our entire planet, but really all of our generations today. And that, of course, is climate change. No matter where you live or what you do or who you are, climate change absolutely is affecting you and the people you love. So today we'll start by talking about what is the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge, and we'll invite you to consider how you can take on the challenge of climate change. So after this brief welcome, I'll kind of give a little bit of information to introduce the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge, and then I will hand it over to an amazing youth activist around climate change, and she has so much wonderful information to share about how she's taking climate action and recommendations for you to do the same. And then we'll talk a little bit more details about next steps to get involved with the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge, and then we'll have plenty of time for any questions. And if you're watching this on the recording, please feel free. I will share some resources at the end about how to contact us. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions that were not able to be addressed today. All right, so the challenge, the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge is an opportunity for students in grades 6 through 12 to form teams, either under the kind of guidance of your classroom teacher or a club leader, an after school student group leader, things like that, where you'll be forming teams of between 2 and 12 students to actually think about a climate issue that is important to you and important in your community, and then think about how you can actually take action on eliminating that problem, or at least making progress towards eliminating that problem. So you'll complete either a school-based or a community-based project that addresses either the human causes of climate change or the impacts of climate change on our environment. So we'll talk about many different ideas about what these things could be. But the last part of the challenge is once you're actually complete the project, you'll be creating and submitting a digital story video about the project. It's roughly a 3 to 5 minute video where you will be sharing with us not only why this was an important project for you to take on and what you did, but how your actions can actually have a truly positive impact around the climate crisis. The timeline for the challenge this year is over the month of February. We will have a number of educational sessions, such as this one. We also have one coming up on Friday, the 4th, to kind of give a lot more information about how to create that digital story and tips around that. And then all throughout the rest of the month, we have a number of educational sessions for students and teachers alike to both support your ideas around taking climate action, things around how composting can have a positive impact, how making different choices around energy and our behavioral issues, about how idling has a problem related to climate change, and how you can actually take action on these issues. April 1st is when your challenge submissions are due. So that's when your videos would be submitted to us, along with a little bit more additional information, kind of explaining what your project was, how it connects to climate change, and how it will have a positive impact against this climate crisis. In May, we'll announce our finalists, and then we will keep the winners a secret until our amazing award ceremony in June, which I truly hope that we will be able to hold in person. And we will have to just see how it goes, but hopefully coronavirus is moving quickly past us in June, and we will be able to have a great award ceremony at the Drumthwacket Foundation in Central Jersey. All right, so what I would like to take a minute to do is, why don't we go ahead and use the chat? Do you have any ideas? So just with that very brief intro, do you have any ideas to start about how you maybe could take action around climate change in your community, in your school? Any ideas so far? Or what's a problem that you see in your community? All right, well, hopefully you're just thinking. All right, well, what I'm gonna do is I will, looking at ways to address flooding. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, because flooding, we're having these problems with these huge rainstorms that happen. We're getting more rain on rainy days, but also we have this unique phenomenon going on of what's called sunny day flooding, where even when we haven't had rain, we're still having flooding happening in our local areas. And so thinking about how climate change plays that role. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my share for just a minute. And let me pull up, we have some other great ideas around slides. Where are my slides? There we go. All right, so yep, let me just go ahead and show this real quick again, and then we'll bring on our amazing guest speaker. All right, so yeah, so flooding, that was a great idea, Elizabeth. Also, you can see here's a listing of some of our upcoming sessions around action for students and action that you can take. So thinking about how you can help contribute to a zero waste revolution. So that's a great session coming up in just about a week, thinking about energy strategies to save energy both at your school and at your home, thinking about how trees play a role in the climate and how you can contribute to either native plantings or tree plantings in your local community, but then also getting your voice heard and how you can take action in your local community to to talk to stakeholders, to talk to the Board of Education for your school district, to talk about your local community leaders about how your community and your school can make better choices for our climate and for our environment. And with that little bit of a preview, I am going to go ahead and just give me 1 second to get the right slides up. My apologies. Thank you for your. I'm so pleased to be able to introduce. Here we are. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. Let's these back up. All right. I'm so very pleased to introduce Swan Mora. All right.
Hi, so glad to be here. My name is Swan Mora. I'm a sophomore at Newark Academy. Sorry, I'm a little bit late, so I don't know what you've covered because I had to struggle to find a place to have to give this presentation at my school. Sorry about that. But I'll essentially be talking about some of the work that I do, and hopefully that will give you some ideas for how you can respond to this challenge and what you can do, whether you want to work in your school, on the local, on more of a state level. So if you can go to the, yes, thanks. So I got my start working in a local organization called Our Green West Orange. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about me and the groups I'm a part of. This is a local organization that is fighting for smart environmental decisions in my town. We really focus on open space preservation, smart development, having our town council make climate conscious decisions, and the planting of native plants and trees around town. So I'm the youth representative on our executive committee, and I'm also a member of our 100% commitment committee, which is a project I'll talk a little bit more about later. I also work with another member, Sally Malanga, in her native pollinator garden, where I worked for the past 2 seasons. So this picture here under the Our Green West Orange logo is a picture from our native plant sale, where we were selling native trees and plants that we grew in that garden. So that's really where I got started. And after that, I joined NGSSC, which was really great organization, offered me skills training and the opportunity to join different projects and campaigns that were working more on the state level. So I quickly joined their policy team and a campaign for a Clean Energy Equity Act. And then they gave me the opportunity to start my own campaign. So now I'm the Green Amendment co-coordinator, trying to amend our state constitution to include environmental rights in the Bill of Rights. So me and my other co-coordinator launched this project last January after we were trained by Green Amendments for the Generations, which is working for this in states across the country. And now we're really the student base of the movement in New Jersey. So my job as campaign co-coordinator includes creating campaign strategy, running our meetings, coordinating with our partners and the rest of NGSSC, training others about the Green Amendment and skills they need to advocate for it, running and organizing different events we hold, as well as meeting with legislators. So this picture is of an event we held, a press conference with Maya Van Rossum, who is the lawyer who created the Green Amendment, as well as different legislative staff. Finally, I'm also a member of the Climate Reality Project. So I was trained last April during our national virtual training. So now I'm a part of the Greater New Jersey Gateway chapter of Climate Reality, where I work on the youth committee. And our mission is to support educators and students in meeting the new climate standards. So I'll talk more about what that is in a second, but essentially we now have to start teaching climate change in schools, but many teachers don't know how to do that. So it's really important to start educating and empowering both teachers and students about this new climate material. So we give presentations, and we're currently working on a website of resources for both teachers and students to learn about climate change and how to teach climate change to others. And this picture is of an ed camp we held with our partner Operation Grow, giving a talk to teachers. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit of background on myself, why I'm the person talking to you here today, random high schooler. A little bit of background on the topic. Why are we talking about climate change? I'm sure many of you may be briefly aware of this, but so we're all on the same page. Next slide, please. Climate change, as I'm sure many of you may be aware of, is caused by simply a runaway process that is always active on Earth. So the way our planet heats up is that solar radiation in the form of light waves will pass through our atmosphere where it is absorbed, heats up the planet, and some of it will naturally bounce back and be trapped by greenhouse gases when it hits those greenhouse gases on its way out of the atmosphere, and then it is bounced back onto the surface where it's absorbed instead of going back out into space. So this is happening all the time. It's totally natural, and it's actually essential for life on our planet and having a warm enough planet to exist on. However, Next slide, please. As we increase the amount of these greenhouse gases in our atmosphere to a point that is, I guess, beyond our normal, then our temperature is also going to increase. And that has a wide variety of negative effects. Next slide. So one effect is obviously increased heat, right? So more heat waves and a hotter average temperatures. And sometimes we think, oh, heat's not that bad. We have longer summers. That's cool. But really, heat is a really dangerous effect of climate change. It can cause a lot of death. And among people such as young people and seniors who are really vulnerable, it can have a lot of negative health effects. Associated with heat are also increased storms. So as the atmosphere gets warmer and as the oceans get warmer, you have stronger storms and more frequent storms, such as Hurricane Florence, which I'm sure we all remember from 2018. On the flip side of that are droughts. So as storms, we're not creating new water, right? By having fiercer storms and having more flooding. What's happening is that water is being concentrated in fewer places. And when that happens, some places feel the effects of drought. So for instance, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, they have experienced a lot of serious drought issues that destroy the soil and the way of life there. Hand in hand with drought are also forest fires. So higher temperatures, less water means that it's easier for fires to break out, like this one in Canada and in the United States. We tend to think of these as happening in California and in the West. Further north, we also have the melting of glaciers. So when we think of sea level rise as a common impact of climate change, this is the main cause. So you have giant glaciers like this one in Southwest Greenland. If you look, these are mountains next to the sheet of ice. So mountain-sized sheets of ice all melting and dumping that water into the ocean, which when it happens on a global scale can raise sea levels. When that happens, then you have instances of sunny day flooding, like this picture here in Miami in Florida. So cities like Miami are built pretty much exactly on sea level. So when the sea levels rise, you don't need heavy rains, you don't need hurricanes or storms to bring flooding anymore. It can happen any day when you have a particularly high tide. This is caused by a variety of things throughout our life, but really the biggest point when you look at this picture is that climate change, if you can go to the next slide, is intersectional. Every part of our life, from how we are moving around, from how we're producing our energy, how we're producing our food, all of that is causing emissions of greenhouse gases. So the problem is touching every part of our everyday lives. It's impacting current events, our politics, the economy, the job market for our parents, and that we will enter someday soon, as well as our own homes and our communities. And it's also touching every part of the future, right? What jobs we're going to get, where we should buy our homes to be safe and avoid disasters, where we're going to be getting our food, and who lives in our communities. Therefore, the solutions really need input from everybody, from policymakers, from scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs who are creating new solutions, from community and business leaders who are on the front lines, who know what's happening on the ground in terms of climate change and the solutions, and all other stakeholders, including students, because we all have a stake in our collective future. And finally, we need to be able to change everything, because if climate change is impacting everything, and if everything we're doing is contributing to it, even if it's not a big change, every part of our lives will be impacted in some way. And so we really need cooperation for this to happen. If you can go to the next bullet, because we obviously can't change every part of our life without everybody working together to solve this. Next slide. To help to support this, climate change is coming to our schools. So New Jersey, and we're very proud of this, New Jersey became the first state in the country to mandate that climate change be taught in all subjects and on all grade levels. So as you can see, climate change needs to be looked at not just through the scientific lens that we think about it. We think of climate change as being a science class issue, but through the lenses of health, through future careers, social studies, and even arts. And if you go down another bullet, language as well. So it's really forcing us to think about climate change in an intersectional way. And since we're starting kindergarten and going all the way up through to grade 12, that really means that once you graduate high school, you know a lot about climate change from every single angle, and you know how to deal with it. These changes are required to go into effect at the beginning of the next school year. So it's pretty soon, and it's demanding a pretty big change, right? It's really sweeping. It's happening no matter what subject or age you teach. If you're a teacher, you're going to be impacted by this decision. But hopefully we can use it less of a challenge and extra burden on our teachers and more of an opportunity to further empower students. Because really what these new standards are recognizing is that students have power. We just need to teach students what they need to know so that they can wield that power. So oftentimes as young people, we think of ourselves as being helpless as not having the same power that we would if we were an adult. And we think about, oh, if I was an adult, what would I be able to do? But we don't do anything because we're, just students. But actually, young people have a lot of power. For one, we have a special appeal to decision makers, a really unique ethos. For once, legislators and decision makers are a lot more likely to pay attention when it's young people bringing up environmental issues. When we talk to legislators and talk to local officials, oftentimes we may go with someone who's older and more experienced and knows them well. But the fact is that when it's the same people going to them about the same issues over and over, it kind of just goes into the background and they don't pay attention. But when it's us from NGSC coming, new faces bringing up a new perspective and like a special interest group, you could call us, then they are a lot more likely to pay attention, because we also have a unique type of moral authority, because this is our future that they're risking and we are dependent on them to fix it, which is a very different angle than many adults can play. Students are also very locally adaptable. Young people tie communities together through the school system, right? Most people know at least some young people in their community, which really gives youth unique access to the community. So when you tie this with our unique moral authority, the plan Reach People through students can be adapted to whatever demographic, whatever type of community you're trying to reach. And then finally, we have strong student support networks. So this includes schools and clubs and also youth organizations like NGSC that provide training. And all of this is like a really informal, grassroots and cooperative support structure that means that can really amplify these first two advantages that students have. And then finally, this is personal, right? Climate change is about our futures. And today it's also about our lives, our homes, and our health and the health of our communities. So no one is going to fight harder for climate action than students. And all of this is on top of our default power as citizens. So we don't have less power than adults. We have everything they have and more. So now that I've tried to hype you up after talking about all the depressing details of climate change, hopefully it worked. How can we actually take action on this? Well, if you can go to the next slide, please, there's two different ways we're going to focus on. The first one is a mitigation, which means stopping climate change that has yet to happen. And there's several different focus areas here, most of them targeting some of the different causes of climate change that you saw in the infographic. So energy and heat, which is mostly burning fossil fuels and releasing carbon dioxide, deforestation, which destroys carbon sinks, which means storage of carbon dioxide, meaning we can't draw it out of the atmosphere as easily. Agriculture, which a lot of agriculture practices today, they can drive deforestation, and also the way we treat soil actually results in soil which has a lot of carbon in it, releasing that into the atmosphere. Transportation, you saw a lot of pictures in that infographic of different types of transportation, planes, and also land travel, how we're moving our goods around in New Jersey. This is like the biggest single emitter transportation sector in our state. So this is an incredibly important factor. And then finally, industry. Everything we use in our everyday lives comes from factories that use energy and that also sometimes use different chemical processes, like for instance, making plastic, making concrete that emit different types of greenhouse gases. So there's several different ways you can tackle these issues at home, and probably you've heard of many of these things before, so I'll run through them pretty quickly. And there's also pros and cons to individual action. Yes, it's good to have people going and doing it at home, but also this is a systemic issue. We can't put all the blame on individuals, but it is good to keep these small things in mind, as they can be components of a bigger project that can be scaled up to really apply on the community level. So we can think about composting food instead of throwing it out, because when you throw it in the trash can, it's going to a landfill. And when you think about what a landfill is, that's a lot of different waste being packed very tightly together. And in that environment, you have no oxygen. So food is still going to decompose. When it decomposes without any oxygen, then it's going to release methane. And when you compost it in a very oxygen-rich environment, you hear how you have to turn compost to make sure it has exposure, then it's going to release carbon dioxide, and methane is a lot more dangerous than carbon dioxide. It traps more heat. So we want to compost rather than throwing it in landfill. Eating less meat is another great one. A lot of times you hear people say, oh, if you care about the planet, you have to be vegan. You have to be vegetarian. If not, you don't care about Earth. That's not true. You can eat less meat once a week, eat less meat a few meals, and that is all really great contributions, just what you can. And there's many like really delicious and healthy ways that you can do this. Buying less is also great because when I talked about industry and how everything that we're using has a carbon footprint from that production process, if we buy less, we're taking less things carbon footprint and adding it to our own. Green purchases, obviously, as young people, as kids, we can't necessarily make the decision, oh, yes, we're having solar panels for a house. Yes, our next car is going to be electric. But we can talk to our parents and have these conversations. If your family has the means to consider these things, that's a good opportunity, because a lot of times our parents don't have the time to do the research. They have other things on their minds. So it's great to have these conversations if that type of opportunity comes up. Walking or biking is one you've also probably heard before. So instead of driving everywhere, using public transportation if it's available, or walking or biking places. Of course, this is not just an individual decision. It depends on your community. If you don't have sidewalks and bike lanes, like in my town, you can't really have this option. So this is an example of how you can take a personal decision and like scale it up to apply to your community and say, hey, we should build more bike lanes. We should have more sidewalks or something like that. Supporting local businesses is also great, not only for, local economy, supporting your community members, but also because it cuts down on transportation costs in terms of carbon. So if you have things that are not being shipped halfway across the globe, but that are being produced right nearby, you have a lot less carbon emissions from that. And then finally, reusable products. So if we're buying less, of course, we want to reuse products instead of having to buy something like, I don't know, every day, or a new package of something every week. So next, kind of scaling out from the home into local advocacy. Local advocacy is incredibly important because all of these global decisions we're making, like, we want to cut down our nation's emissions by 40%. All of that is happening on the local level. All of it has to become local for it to be reality. So this is really, in my personal experience, where we can make the most substantial gains and take the most climate action. So some things that I've done include being a part of a 100% commitment committee in that organization I mentioned before. We're an intergenerational team of community members, about half high schoolers, half other adult members, and we're currently researching and creating a plan for our town to transition to 100% renewable energy by 2030. And as you can see here, this is a climate reality campaign. So they have this really useful toolkit that means you're in line with what people are doing in towns and in college campuses across the country. So you're not doing this alone. It's many people who are working on the same project. And if it's your first campaign, this is a really useful step-by-step outline of how to get that done. We also work on advocating for green municipal choices. So what this means is attending your town council meetings, your environmental commission or green team meetings, and getting to know local officials and also local advocates, because really we think we know our town because obviously we live there. But if you're not attending these meetings, if you're not in the loop about things, it's very easy to not know what's going on, not know the local politics or the local issues. So the first thing you want to do if you want to make impact locally is just start listening and start learning and talking to different people to get different perspectives and learn what's happening. And from there, you can start working on the issues you think are most important to contribute to your town. So personally, I've worked on strengthening our tree ordinance, protecting street trees, and preserving pieces of land from development. But this is going to look different for every community. You just have to go out and see what's out there and see what's happening, because again, all global change needs to manifest as local action. So it may seem like you're not doing a lot, but that is really the backbone of the climate action movement. And then finally is green school certification. So at my last high school, I was on the green team, which was a mix of teachers and students working to get school certification from Sustainable Jerseys for School. So we got a $10,000 grant for a hydroponics project, as well as a solar bus station. And in my middle school, my science teacher and I wrote a grant proposal for a composting project, and we got $2,000 for that. And this really makes a difference in your school. And it's great because school administrations love Sustainable Jersey certification. So it's really good if you're facing resistance from your school. They think it's too expensive. They don't want to do it. This is really attractive to them. It makes your school greener, and it can give you access to different grants and opportunities. Some other ideas include getting your town to join a clean energy aggregation. So what this means is several towns will group together and they'll go into negotiations with a power company to get cheaper solar power, so that all the residents in that town, unless they opt out, can then have cheaper solar power than they would fossil fuel power, which is pretty cool since most people think solar power is more expensive. Community solar is another option to get solar power. So if you're in a community or you live in a household where getting your own solar panels is not on the table for you, but you still want to have access to clean energy, this is a program that's really taking off, run by the state, where they are having solar panels in different communities, mostly I think it's like low income and environmental justice communities where people can't buy them themselves. This is a great option. Advocating sustainable development is also really useful, and that's where a lot of local organizations come in, learning what that means for your town. And then finally, awareness campaigns. And yes, we need a lot more than awareness if we're going to be able to solve the climate crisis, but different communities are in different places. They need to hear different things. They have different knowledge levels, and like the minds of people are prepared for different things. So sometimes you need to do an awareness campaign first. Next is adaptation. So adaptation means changing our way of life, changing our communities to adapt to climate change. That's already happening, because let's face it, it's not an issue for the future. It's already starting today. Similarly, we have our focus areas here. This time, instead of focusing on the causes of climate change, we're focusing on the effects, which in New Jersey mean increased rainfall, worse flooding, a loss of biodiversity, worse heat and heat waves, and along the coast, sea level rise. Next slide. Nature-based solutions are really personally my favorite, and what I think is the best solutions for adapting to many of these climate impacts. So this first picture here is a picture of my younger brother walking in South Mountain Reservation, which is just over 2,000 acres of forest that's preserved near my town. So forests are really important to preserve because they sequester carbon, for one, so they help fight climate change, and they also build healthy soils, they reduce flooding, and they help to clean water. They also preserve biodiversity and help preserve healthy ecosystems. And when we have healthy ecosystems, then we have these things called ecosystem services, which are really any way that the natural world benefits us, and most of them directly combat climate change. That's things like I mentioned before, managing flooding and cleaning water, cleaning the air from air pollution, pollination of our food crops, et cetera, et cetera. They contribute trillions of dollars to the global economy every year. And without them, our communities really can't survive, or it would be a lot more expensive for us to do that. So these directly combat the impacts of climate change. Next, my personal favorite is native gardening. So this is a picture of the native pollinator garden where I worked. This is a bed of pink turtle heads. We plant native flowers, grasses, and trees, and we sell it to members of our communities to try and get native plants in as many backyards and gardens as we can. Native pollinator garden, we focus on two things. The first is the planting of natives instead of non-natives. So many plants that you'll see in landscaping in plant stores are not from New Jersey. They're from different parts of the US, or they're from different countries. And what this means is they don't fit with our ecosystems. So they don't provide the same ecosystem services, and they don't support biodiversity. So we really try and plant natives to stop the spread of invasives and to contribute to our local ecosystems. Secondly, we really focus on supporting pollinators. So pollinators include bees and butterflies, but also many other insects and animals we don't think of, like birds and bats, ants, beetles, moths, and countless different insects that are really essential for both our ecosystems and also for us to grow our food, because United States agriculture, it really depends on natural pollinators. So we try and have diverse plants to support diverse pollinators, different bloom times, and have trees and shrubs to support them throughout their life cycle. And what all this means is that we are cultivating a garden that, yes, is very pretty, but also that is imitating a natural ecosystem, so that, yes, we have preserved the ecosystems we can. And then in these areas that have been cut down, their lawn now, we're trying to replace the lawn with something that can help tie together these ecosystems. Native plants are great because they support biodiversity and ecosystems in that way, and they also have deeper roots, so they have better flood control and erosion control, and they fight invasives, all of which are effects of climate change. Rain gardens are also native gardens. We try and plant native plants, but they're specifically plants that will they will control flooding, and they will clean our water, which is incredibly important in New Jersey, planting gardens like this one in picture 3, because the main impact of climate change in New Jersey is really increased rainfall, increased flooding both on the coast and inland. And we're also the most urbanized state in the nation, meaning we have a lot of cars, we have a lot of pollution, and we have a lot of runoff that can contaminate our water. So rain gardens are meant to directly treat all of these impacts. Going back to trees for a second, this picture 4 is a picture of me and another member of my environmental club planting or holding, I think, sap seedlings for our native yeah, we were selling native trees. We sold a couple hundred trees to different members of our communities, and we planted them in private yards, but it's great to plant them wherever you can, private property, streets, public property like parks and schools, because, and that really ties into this next picture, which is of street trees, because we want to plant street trees where we don't have them and preserve them where we do, not cut them down. Like this tree here has an X on it because it was marked to be cut down. This is next to my house. And what trees do is that they help directly combat all of the effects of climate change on our communities. They will cool the neighborhood, they'll manage flooding, they'll reduce air pollution, and they'll help filter water, which is essential as all of these issues get worse. Finally, education. So some things I've done with this, and as I talk about this, think about maybe how much you think your classmates or your community will know about climate change, because every community is going to be in a different place. Maybe put that in the chat and think about which of these tactics may be best or most needed for your community. First is simply talking to teachers and classmates, which is really easy to do. We think it's not climate work, but really it is, because creating actual forums and public spaces to talk about climate change, no matter whether it be just educating people on what it is, talking about climate anxiety, talking about actions we can take, whatever fits your community, we need to create kind of that personal infrastructure of people who are connected and who know about this if we're ever going to make action. So that's really the first step in any community. Next, it's important for us to educate our community and our local officials, which means making public comment at town council meetings, attending commission meetings, and talking with the commissioners and finding opportunities to talk with your community. So making presentations, attending the meetings of different local groups, and organizing different events and forums to talk about climate issues. We need to remember that just because people may be adults or even a local leader like our mayor or even our legislator doesn't mean that they know more than us, especially because young people are really the experts on climate change. We're the ones doing the research, we're the ones learning about this. We oftentimes do know more than them. And it's important that we show them how much of a priority they need to make this, or else they're never going to be able to make the right decisions in mind, right? And then little plug here, I mentioned my Climate Reality Youth Group before. This is really our focus, education to empower students and to help teachers learn how to teach, really teach climate better. So if you're interested in that type of thing, that group is always open. And some other ideas include awareness campaigns. I mentioned this before. Obviously, we need to do more, but it's still important groundwork to lay for future actions, especially if you're in a community where it seems like nobody cares about climate change. Green teams, whether it be starting one at your school, like I started one at my middle school, are really important, or starting one in your town. Some towns don't have environmental commissions. They don't have any sort of official green team. So I know people that have lived in towns like that who have talked to their mayors or town councils about getting one started, because that's important too. You can also take advantage of independent study and class projects to create something or to research something and then share it with your classmates and share it with your school. And finally, you can use school clubs, whether that be environmental clubs that have already been started or even other clubs. It's great to partner with clubs that have no obvious connection to climate change, and then talk with them about how they can connect what they do towards climate issues. So for this sustainability challenge, what can you do really is focus on school or community-based impact. So a tangible outcome like a physical change to the environment, a reduction in a climate causing factor like the mitigation stuff we talked about earlier, increased awareness of climate change and need for behavior changes. So education, civic engagement, and advocacy, as well as research and funding proposals. So those are kind of the categories you can fit stuff into. And then for some examples, some things I've done from my experience include native plant sales and the planting of native plants and gardening tree plantings. It's important that they're native trees. Doing a school or community food garden. So hydroponics are great if your school maybe doesn't have room for the typical like vertical type of garden. You can do vertical gardening or hydroponics inside of a classroom. Science teachers really love this. You can do student trainings like we do at NGSC to educate students, whether it be skill-based or knowledge-based. Running campaign events to support advocacy, research plans like we're doing on the 100% commitment committee, site research. I've gone to say forests that we've been trying to preserve and actually done research and made observations looking for, hey, what parts of this forest make it eligible for different protections can help us preserve it. So that's important for campaign work on the local level. You can start a green team or an environmental club. You can also start a campaign. So I've been with the 100% commitment committee since it got started. worked on a stronger tree ordinance and preserving open space, and then finally working on state bills. And yes, it may seem intimidating working on something that is as big as the state level, but especially with organizations like NGSC that can help amplify what you're working on and connect you to students across the state, that is always possible. Creating educational resources are really important. So that's stuff like with the website I mentioned before, creating slideshows and lesson plans and resources for teachers and students to learn more and to learn how to teach this type of thing. Next is creative design. So you can implement these in your school or in your home. And I know some students in my town who have actually started their own businesses. So if you have a good idea and you think you can make it efficiently and share it with others, why not? What's stopping you? And so some just illustrations of that. This top left picture is a picture of, I think there's a self-watering planter that I made from an old bunk bed, a PVC pipe, and some old ice cream containers. So you can take stuff like this, take old waste from your home and make it into something useful and environmentally friendly. Here below that is a picture from our native plant sale. So we have students who are running the sale, and then adult community members who are coming, learning about native plants from the students that we train, we educated about native plants, and then taking native plants back to their own homes. Here is an event we did just earlier that same year where we were selling native trees. So we planted some of them, and then we also had some people plant them themselves, and they sent us pictures. And then here below that is a picture of a student training like the type we do at NGSC. So this is a part of our Green Amendment training series where we teach students about what the Green Amendment is and the skills they need to advocate for the Green Amendment and also for other similar legislation. Here's a picture of some tomatoes that were grown. This must have been early in the season that were grown in my middle school garden. So we would mostly pick fruit and vegetables, and we would send it home with students, part of our environmental club. But if you have a small enough school, you can have a garden that contributes to your cafeteria, which is pretty great. Here's another picture right next to that of our native pollinator plant sale. So we had, along with all the plants, we were selling these signs telling about the different pollinators we had that were a part of our garden, different plants and different practices we used. Next to that, this insect, this is the widow skimmer, which is a type of dragonfly. And many of us see bugs and are like, gross, why do we want that on our flowers? Flowers are supposed to be pretty, not have bugs on them. But actually, a lot of bugs are not pests. They're really useful, and dragonflies especially play an important role in the ecosystem and are important predators, and we want to have predatory insects to limit pests and not need to use pesticides. Right below that is a picture from the website we're working on at Climate Reality. So this is meant for teachers teaching all different grade levels. So you can see there's a little bit about Climate 101, introducing people to climate change. There's talking about teaching for empowerment, how you can teach students to make them feel like there's hope rather than depressing them. And then right below that, very similar, is tackling climate anxiety with students. And next to that is a picture of a student rally we held. We had, I think, over 350 people at this rally. I and 2 other students organized to preserve a forest that was being proposed to clear for development. And we succeeded with help from COVID, but that was pretty great.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I know we're just about out of time, but just quickly to highlight, there is a component of the challenge around digital storytelling. And we have a session coming up on Friday where we're going to give lots more information really focused around creating and really telling exactly what Sean just did. Why is this something important to you? What can you do to take action? And then sharing with us about, you know, how your actions have a positive impact. So lots more about digital storytelling coming up. Well, I'm going to skip this for right now, but again, kind of how I showed in the very beginning, we have tons of fantastic action sessions for students to help you learn a little bit more. You know, we were able to get so many little like tidbits and nuggets about ideas, hopefully about projects that you could do based on what I was just talking about. Everything from raising awareness and getting your voice heard for advocacy, like the Green Amendment and other things, but even more local projects in your community as well. For any of the teachers listening or watching the recording, we have professional development around participating in this project, the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge, as well as really bringing climate change into your classroom, into your school more broadly, kind of thinking about it as more of a systems issue as opposed to anything else. but those sessions are coming up as well. There are so many resources on our website as well. You can find all of those, a teacher guide, a student guide, which has some very specific information about what is actually being submitted for this competition to hopefully win some money for your school, as well as a rubric to kind of give you an insight into see how we'll be scoring the projects. Teachers, please register. It's not committing you to submit something, but it helps to keep us in the loop and keep sharing additional information and resources. Lots of great resources are already available on the website, but we'll be sharing more as things come out. As I have just one, if anybody has questions, I'd be happy to take them now. I know we're just about over time, but I am curious about when Swan, wow, since middle school, that's incredible. Kind of, I'm curious about when you first started hearing about and learning about climate change, but I will leave it if there's anybody out there that has a question either about the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge or a question for Swan, I would love to take them now. But I want to be respectful of every time. So I know we're a few minutes over, but I think this was great information and hopefully it really gave you some insight, different projects that you could do as students and realize that you do have power in this really important environmental crisis going on in our world, and we can have a positive impact. So I'll stop talking now. If anybody has questions, you can throw them in the chat. But thank you so much for your attention, and we can't wait to see what amazing projects you all come up with. So thank you.